The desert was already cooling when I rode into Dust Haven, but the heat of the day still clung to the ground like a fever. My horse moved with the same rhythm I'd had for months steady, unhurried, as if neither of us had any reason to get anywhere fast. Dust Haven wasn't a place men came to stay. It was a stop, a town that sagged under its own years, where even the boards of the saloon leaned like they wanted to lie down and quit. I hadn't meant to draw attention, but eyes always find a stranger. The swinging doors of the saloon groaned when I stepped inside, and conversation dipped for just a breath. I ordered whiskey with coins that felt too heavy for what little I had left. The first burn down my throat was almost welcome, something sharp to remind me I was still here, not back at the ranch where smoke had once curled against the horizon like a snake dot. It didn't take long before someone said it. They never do. Boone, a man's voice rang out, too loud, too eager. Jonas Pike. I remembered him from years ago, always needing an audience. Ain't you the one whose ranch burned down while he was God knows where? The laughter that followed wasn't kind. I kept my eyes on the amber in my glass, though the words clawed deep. Jonas didn't stop there. He leaned against the bar, smirking wide enough for everyone to see. Heard your kin choked on smoke calling your name. Guess you couldn't be bothered to answer. I didn't move. The old shame hit me the way a fist would tight in the gut, hot in the chest. He wasn't wrong. I hadn't been there. That truth sat heavier than any insult Jonas could sling. The room waited, half hoping I'd rise, swing, break a chair across his back. That would have given them something to drink over for weeks, but I didn't. My silence was my only answer. I finished my whiskey, left coins on the wood, and walked out under the weight of their stares. The sun was nearly gone, its last light stretching long across the dirt road. I passed the church, the shuttered mercantile, and the hollow sound of a town that judged men by what they failed to save. Past the outskirts, the wind shifted easier. The earth didn't care about my shame, and out there no one whispered my name like a curse. I settled my horse at the edge of a dry wash and built a fire with slow hands. The flames lit my face in flickers, just enough to remind me of everything I'd lost. I drank from my canteen, chewed the last of my bread, and listened to the desert breathe. I had come to Dust Haven, looking for nothing, because nothing was easier to carry than the past. The desert carries sound in strange ways. That night, with Dust Haven quiet and my fire ticking, I heard a human sound, a scraped breath, half a word. It could have been the wind. It wasn't. I took my canteen and lantern and followed the noise into the dark. I found her at the base of a rise, half tangled in tumbleweed. She'd fallen sideways, one hand pressed to her belly, the other scratching faint lines in the grit. Blood had dried in a black seam down her dress. New blood shone at the edges. Her face was sharp. "Leave," she said, softer then. "Let me go. I should have." A cut-up stranger is trouble, and the sheriff already weighed my name like a bad coin. But there was smoke in my throat again, a door I hadn't opened when it mattered. I knelt anyway. "I've got water," I said. "I'm going to lift your head." She tried to turn away. I steadied her neck and brought the canteen slow. She took a mouthful and coughed. The lantern caught her eyes dark and scared under the grit. "Name's Elias Boone," I said, a small proof I meant to stay. "I've got a place not far. I don't want saving," she said. "You can't. Not from this." Her breath stuttered. "And not from men who'll come looking. I can't let you die out here." The words felt like they belonged to the man I used to be, the one who thought a promise could beat fire. I slid my arms beneath her, careful of the knife wound. She bit down on a sound that might have broken us both. "Don't," she hissed. "If you have mercy, leave me to the sky." "No," I said, iron in it. "I won't leave you." "Not again." Something eased in her face that wasn't relief, not yet, but it wasn't refusal either. I carried her in stages, pausing for breath and water, letting the night cool the fever. At my shack, the door caught on the warped plank. I kicked it open and laid her on the cot I'd never shared. The room held my small life, a blackened coffee pot, a few canned peaches, a photograph turned face down. I set the lantern by her and fetched bandages, clean cloth, a needle, the bottle of whiskey I'd saved. "Tell me your name," I said while I cut the dress from the wound. I poured whiskey and watched it bite. "Mara," she breathed. "Mara Doolin." Outlaw Ken, blamed for more fires than lightning. Trouble wasn't coming. Trouble had a face. "You can go," she said again, almost courteous. "Lock the door. Let the night do its work." "I gave my word," I said. "You won't be alone. Not while I got breath." I stitched her with the clumsy care of a man repairing the only shirt he owns. She stared at the ceiling, counting knots. When I finished, I set water beside her and tucked a folded blanket at her side. Outside an owl called once. "I meant it," I said. "I won't leave." She turned her head. The defiant edge softened to something breakable. "Then sit," she murmured. "If you won't leave, sit and wait with me." So I did. I sat by the cot while the night stretched long. In that small ring of light, duty took its shape. Not to win, not even to save, but to stay. Dust Haven was a town that never forgot a name, and Mara Doolin's name had been written in curses long before I carried her across its threshold. By morning, whispers leaked like smoke through the streets. How Elias Boone had taken in a wounded woman, how she wore the blood of her own sins. Folks didn't need proof. They only needed a story that made them feel safe in their scorn. I walked into town for supplies, the sun not yet past its climb, and felt eyes follow me from the mercantile porch to the water trough. A woman pulling her child close muttered, "Outlaw's whore." I kept walking. Inside the store I bought flour, salt, and cloth for bandages. My hand shook only once. When I thought of leaving her in that shack alone, Sheriff Amos found me before I reached my horse. His hat shadowed his eyes, his badge dulled by years of dust, but his voice carried the weight of the town behind it. "Heard you've taken in a Doolin girl," he said. "You know what that means?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer, boots crunching gravel. "Jonas Pike says he saw you drag her from the desert. She ain't worth the spit it took to carry her. Best you let her go, Boone. Let nature finish what it started." The old guilt flared sharp. I saw smoke again, felt the heat of timbers collapsing, heard voices calling me from a fire I was too far to fight. I hadn't been there then. I was here now. "She stays," I said. Amos studied me, jaw grinding. "You'll have the whole town on your back. Don't think they won't come for you." "I've carried worse," I told him. My voice was low, steady. The kind that means a man has already decided. Back at the shack, Mara stirred when I entered. Her eyes were glassy, but she tried to sit up, tried to look at me without flinching. "They'll hate you for this," she whispered. I set the flour and cloth down, fetched water to damp her lips. "They already do?" Her laugh was faint, bitter at the edges. "You should have left me. Easier that way." I shook my head and pulled the chair to the door. Not this time. Through the thin walls, the desert hummed with cicadas, endless and unbothered. In that small shack I sat between her frailty and the town's judgment. My back was against the door, my rifle. Leaning nearby, my heart steadier than it had been in years. If Dust Haven wanted her gone, they'd have to go through me. Days slipped into a quiet rhythm. I rose in the bluish hour, fed the stove, boiled thin coffee, thickened porridge with the last spoon of sugar, and set both within her reach. I scrubbed the floorboards and the cut dress. When the sun cleared the ridge, I changed her bandage slow, careful, saying only what was needed. Sometimes she turned her face to the wall and asked me to carry her outside and let the wind finish what the knife began. I didn't answer those requests. I answered fever, tremor, thirst. I answered the cracked places with broth and the cool press of cloth. At noon, I cut what blooms the desert would spare and set them in a chipped blue mug beside the cot. It embarrassed me to do it. "Flowers for a dying woman," Mara said, mouth crooked. "Maybe it's for the room." I said. She ate because I held the spoon steady. When pain came, she gripped my wrist and rode it quiet. When it passed, she let go like she'd remembered the space between us. You should have left me, she said on the third morning, as if setting me free might be a kindness. Trouble follows my name the way dust follows wagons. Trouble follows mine, too, I said. We'll let it catch up when it gets here. I fixed the roof seam, planed the door, braced a cot leg with a wedge from the firewood stack. I sanded the table and set a small carved horse on the shelf bought months back from Silas Ward, a boy who traded whittlings for bread. She noticed it on the fourth evening and traced the curve of its neck without taking it down. When fever woke her raving, I gave water and a word. When the dark hours dragged, I told small things I'd never said aloud. Where coyotes den, how coffee tastes, boiled in a can. I didn't talk about fire. By the fifth morning, she asked for needle and thread to keep her hands busy, and I gave her bandanas to hem. Son picked out a pale scar by her jaw I hadn't seen. I should have been bones on the flats, she said. You are stubborn. I am, I said. It's what I have left. She watched me tear strips for bandages and shook her head. All this for someone you don't know. I know enough, I said, and stepped outside to split wood so she wouldn't see what the answer cost. The shack breathed with us. I learned the sound of her sleep, where to set the chair so I could watch both the door and her face. Each hour I stayed, the vow thickened, not as words but as habit, simple as filling the lamp before dark, as certain as drawing water before the barrel ran low. Why? She asked that night. Why do you keep choosing me? I tried answers that would look clean by daylight and found none. Because I didn't, I said at last. Not when it mattered. I'm done with that kind of leaving. She closed her eyes. The breath she let out was almost a laugh. Then stay, she whispered. Just stay. So I stayed. I kept the stove warm, flowers fading in the mug, the carved horse keeping watch. When coyotes barked far off, I leaned my back to the door and let the sound pass through me. I didn't try to name what had changed between us. I fed it the way you feed a weak, fire-steady patient, careful not to smother it. The storm came in hard from the west, dragging the desert into darkness by noon. Wind shoved grit under the door, rattled loose shingles, and made the shack groan, like it meant to give up. I braced beams with what lumber I had, tied shutters with rope, and pressed my weight against the door until it held Dot inside. Mara sat upright for the first time, her bandana work in her lap, lantern light flaring across her pale face. Storm's only the beginning, she murmured, voice raw. They'll use me to scare themselves into a frenzy. She was right. While the rain hammered our roof, Dust Haven's saloon filled with talk. Jonas Pike was loudest, pounding his mug and spitting words about how the Doolin name meant raids, robberies, barns burned for spite. Mark me, he shouted, a snake heals quicker than that woman, and both will bite the hand that spares em. Sheriff Amos sat by, jaw tight, but he didn't stop the talk. Fear has a way of swelling a man's chest until he believes himself brave. The storm outside only fed the one inside, lightning splitting the sky, while rumors split the town. I went in for honey the next day, a small jar I thought might ease Mara's throat. The storekeeper eyed me like I carried plague. Ain't right, he said, bringing death into your own house. I set the coin down anyway, felt the weight of every gaze on my back as I left. The road home was slick, mud clinging to my boots. At the shack the roof held, the fire still burned, and Mara looked at me with an odd flicker, half thanks, half warning. You shouldn't waste honey on me, she said. It's not wasted, I told her, setting the jar by the mug of flowers. Now brittle and brown Dot when the wind rose again that night, I patched cracks with rags, tightened rope, and waited through the hours while Dust Haven's people sharpened their hate against our walls. I could almost hear it in the gale, the judgment of a town that wanted proof. It was better than the likes of us. Mara watched me as I worked, her voice low. You're bracing more than wood. Maybe she was right. Each nail I drove was a veil against the storm outside, against the storm waiting in town, against the voice in me that still said I'd failed once before. When the thunder rolled far off at last, I sat by her cot, clothes damp, hands raw. She shifted the blanket and whispered, "You're a fool." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll be a fool who stays." And in the silence after, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves, I felt the storm had done its work. It had shown me what I was willing to hold against the world. By the third clear morning after the storm, the fever loosened its grip. Mara could sit without gritting her teeth and braid her hair with hands that didn't shake. She asked for the carved horse. I set it in her palm. She rubbed the whittled mane with her thumb and smiled unguarded, almost young. "Silas Ward made this," she said. "He traded me one once for a ribbon." "He remembers," I said. "He forgets hunger faster than kindness." The day ran on with small work. I boiled bandanas, aired blankets, swept grit from the corners, and for the first time pulled the photograph from where it lay face down. "Family?" she asked. "Was," I said. I tried to put it away, but memory doesn't take orders. The picture showed a porch I'd built, my brother's sleeve rolled, my mother's mouth trying not to smile, a dog that would howl at trains. "I was 2 days out," I said. "Went to sell cattle. Fires happen quick. Some said lightning. Doesn't matter. I wasn't there to pull them from the smoke." I swallowed. "Jonas says they called my name. If they did, I didn't answer." Mara set the horse on the blanket and reached without asking, her fingers light on my wrist. "Men talk because their roofs are dry," she said. "They don't know how flame eats words out of a throat. I should have been there. It came out rough. I should have died on the flats," she said. "I didn't. We're both standing between what should have happened and what did. Maybe that's not a curse. The town says your name brings trouble. The town wants." An easy story. A shadow crossed her face. "My kin made bad ones. Some wore my blood. I ran anyway. I didn't light your fire." She looked at the photo. "Men who need a villain keep carving one until the wood splits." The shack felt smaller around the truth, but clearer. "Sheriff Amos will come again," I said. "Jonas will make sure of it. Then let him find you telling the truth," she said. "Not hiding from a life that burned. If it comes to it, let him find me standing, not being carried. I won't be a secret you're ashamed of." I stared at the hinge where the door sticks, at the scratch where I'd kicked it open, carrying her. Shame had lived in that wood longer than she had. I was tired of feeding it. "I left once," I said. "I won't leave again. Not when the town shouts, not when the badge taps, not when the night turns mean. If you're here, I'm here." She let out a breath that trembled and steadied. "Then we're decided," she whispered. "Maybe neither of us is cursed. Maybe we're just the ones who stayed." I set the photograph upright on the shelf beside the carved horse and the blue mug where the flowers had crisped to paper. It felt wrong at first, then, like drawing water after a long walk plain, necessary. Mara finished a neat hem and bit the thread free. "Thank you for choosing me," she said, so quiet I might have missed it. "I didn't at first," I said. "I do now, every hour." Outside a hawk cried once. I trimmed the lamp's wick. For the first time since Dust Haven, the light in my shack looked like something a man could stand in without flinching. Sheriff Amos came on a gray morning, not alone. Half the town trudged with him, boots sinking in sand still damp from the storm. Jonas Pike strutted near the front, smirk wide, eyes greedy for spectacle. Their shadows stretched long across the tree I say. Wash as they neared my shack. I stepped outside before they reached the door, rifle slung loose at my side, not raised but ready. The crowd stopped a few yards off. Men cleared throats. Women pulled scarves higher. Amos adjusted his hat, eyes heavy. "Boone," he said, "this ain't your fight. Hand her over. Let the law deal with what she's carried here." "Law?" I asked. "Or gossip?" Jonas barked a laugh. "She's a Doolan. That name's enough. Behind me, the shack door creaked. Mara leaned there, pale but upright, one hand pressed to the frame for balance. Her voice cut clear despite its thinness. "I never asked for mercy," she said, "but I won't deny it was given." The crowd shifted. A boy's cough, a woman's mutter. Amos's face darkened. "Pyleas, you'll bring the whole town down. On your head. You stand with her. You stand against Dust Haven." I tightened my grip on the rifle stock. My mouth was dry, but the word came steady. "No." It rang louder than the wind. Jonas sneered, spat, but his smirk faltered when silence pressed in. For all their numbers, no man stepped forward. Then Silas Ward, the orphan boy who carved horses. For bread, slipped from the edge of the crowd. He walked to my side, shoulders thin but set firm. He didn't say a thing, just stood there, eyes straight ahead. That broke something. The mob wasn't a mob anymore. They shifted, restless, ashamed of their own noise. One by one, heads dropped. Feet shuffled back. Even Jonas looked for someone to laugh with and found none. Amos's jaw clenched, but he saw what I saw. Dust Haven had no stomach to push farther. He tipped his hat, slow, and turned away. The others followed, scattering like tumbleweed. The last of them had gone. I let out the breath I'd been holding. Mara swayed in the doorway, and I went to steady her. She leaned against me, whispering, "You stood." "So did you?" I said. The desert lay wide and empty again, the echo of the crowd fading into silence. For the first time, the shack felt less like a place to hide, and more like a place we had chosen. That night, Mara's strength slipped, her breath shallow as ash. She gripped my hand, whispering, "I'm glad I wasn't alone." I held her until dawn, repeating my vow. When the sun rose, she was still, her thanks the last sound in the room. I buried her beneath the mesquite, Silas standing silent beside me.